Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Blanco Brothers has been in business in Louisiana for about 30 years now. I have personal experience with this company, and I know others who have as well. If you have a business or a home and you've got roofing, gutter, sheet metal issues at all, one number you need to know, and that's Blanco Brothers Construction. He will treat you right financially, and he will take very good care of you with regard to the quality of the service that he provides. I cannot recommend Blanco Brothers Construction more highly enough. Memorize the number 225-226-4222. Blanco Brothers Construction, the very best in the business. Red Zeppelin is the best kept secret, but because of us, it's really not a secret anymore. Anybody who has not been to Red Zeppelin on Perkins Road in Baton Rouge, you're truly missing out. The best environment, the best service, and the best pizza in the state of Louisiana. Go to Red Zeppelin today. Tell them the State of Freedom sent you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the State of Freedom, where we are grounded in faith in the Constitution. We're committed to giving voice to truth, living with courage, and taking action. It is, what day is it? Thursday, March 5th. It's 10 a.m. Central. And we, good morning, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing well. Where's the week gone?
It's evaporated into
My
the ether.
God.
Yeah. I'm Danielle Walker, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, the newly, freshly shaven Chris Alexander, the watchdog in chief of Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group. Chris, you're looking sharp.
Thank you. Took about 2 pounds off when I shaved.
It's amazing. I recognized yesterday that I hadn't seen your whole face in a while.
Exactly. Now you know what the real man looks like.
Well, we are coming to you live today on Voice of the People USA TV and radio network, on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. You can always catch us later on the podcast audio only platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcast. Well, the 2026 legislative session is almost here. Obviously, Monday is the big day where the gavels go down in Baton Rouge. And, you know, we have some questions. We want to know, will the lawmakers advance the people's priorities, or will the politicians prevail?
Choose this day whom you shall serve.
That's right. That's right. I guess we'll see, Chris. We'll see. I mean, look, we're going to be there. You're going to be there in physical presence. I'll probably be there more in your ear. But
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, you always know how to find me.
that's true. And I think maybe I'll get there some days too, Chris, but I really want to make sure that any legislators watching this know that we want to help you do the right thing for the people. That's what we are here for, right? We're absolutely here for that. Now, we're here to protect against bad legislation. We're here to warn against bad legislation and to fight against it. But what we really truly want is to see good laws passed, bad laws repealed, and good people championed. So
Exactly.
that's what I'm hoping
and there's
for.
some good laws, and there's
Yeah.
some good bills.
There are some really good bills. So before we get into that, let me do the scripture of the day. Today it is Romans chapter 2. It's okay. Everything's fine.
As long as you didn't knock the coffee over, that's all.
I
That's
know,
the most important thing.
My ruler fell out of my Bible. It's Romans chapter 2, verses 4 through 8. And it says, "Do the riches of his extraordinary kindness make you take him for granted and despise him? Haven't you experienced how kind and understanding he has been to you? Don't mistake his tolerance for acceptance. Do you realize that all the wealth of his extravagant kindness is meant to melt your heart and lead you to repentance? But because of your calloused heart and refusal to change direction, you are piling up wrath for yourself in the day of wrath when God's righteous judgment is revealed. for he will give to each one in return for what he has done. For those living in constant goodness and doing what pleases him, seeking an unfading glory and honor and imperishable virtue, will experience eternal life. But those governed by selfishness and self promotion, whose hearts are unresponsive to God's truth, would rather embrace unrighteousness and will experience the fullness of wrath. And it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. And it's God's grace that helps us see ourselves in the reflection of his perfect image and recognize where we've gone astray and where we've missed the mark. He doesn't show us our failures to condemn us. He helps us to see our failures and mistakes so we can become more like him and become more and more the person he's created us to be. He wants soft hearts so we can quickly recognize our mistakes and faults. And when we recognize them quickly and deal with them quickly, we have less baggage and less mess. So that way we can be more effective in our Father's business. When we ignore our failures and mistakes, we drag them around with us, justifying them in our hearts and minds. And that's how a callus starts to form on our hearts. That's what begins to make us unresponsive to God's invitation to repentance. So my challenge to us today is let's be quick to forgive. Let's give grace to those the Lord puts in our path. And let's invite Holy Spirit to search our heart for any calluses, prejudices, or blind spots we might have so we can address those, clear them out, and start fresh. And there's no better day to do that than today.
That's absolutely outstanding. As you're praying, Danielle, I'm thinking that a lot of times the reason why people do not really come face to face with their own sins and their own mistakes and their own faults is that they are afraid of them. I think
Yeah.
somewhere deep down inside, people doubt whether or not if I fully and completely and openly face my own transgressions, my own frailties, my own sins, in complete total relief, that I won't be able to face I can't face it, and there's no way I could possibly be forgiven for it. So we either justify it, rationalize it, or completely run away from it. So I think the message of today really is this is not just a theoretical statement. It's not just a platitude. The fact of the matter is, there really is nothing within us that we've done. The worst shame, the worst sins, the worst mistakes, nothing is beyond the power of God's redemption. In fact, He's more eager to heal us and forgive us from those deep, dark things that we're afraid of than He is from anything else.
Yeah.
Because very often that is the very thing that is putting up the block that's keeping us from God. But it's really our own limitations to believe that God really does have the power to penetrate to the very depths of who we are, beyond rationalization, beyond justification, beyond concealment, that he wants to see it all. He already sees it all, but he wants to work with us. He wants us to cooperate in the movement of his grace. And we really can't do that as long as we have these walls built up that are usually constructed by our own incapacity to really, our own fear about really facing um, our own sins, our own humanity, our own frailties. In reality, we don't have anything to fear because he's bigger than any mistake that we have ever made.
Yeah. So good, Chris. This morning before I was reading in Romans, I was reading, the Lord led me to Philemon, and it's just a single chapter scripture. It's a single chapter book, rather. And the whole book is about Paul's father's heart for Onesimus, who was a slave who had stolen or done something wrong by his master. And Paul was the letter was Paul's attempt to restore Onesimus to his master, Philemon, who was a believer. And I think that was just such a beautiful picture. So for anybody who's struggling with exactly what you were talking about, Chris, I would encourage them to go to Philemon and just read this single chapter, small book. It's 3 pages in a very small Bible. So it's probably 1 page in a normal size Bible. And I think it really shows the Father's heart to restore us and for us to be the ones who are able to show that kind of forgiveness. So
Yeah,
be encouraged with that today.
absolutely. And we really, really do have to start with ourselves.
Yeah.
We have to start with ourselves. We cannot show the real love of God, the real forgiveness of God, the real compassion of God with others if we don't first show it to ourselves.
Yeah.
And it's extremely important that we're able to do that. And really, it's only by the grace of God that we're able to do it. But He desires it. But there was a priest that used to tell me, Danielle, that God's stance is the same stance as Christ's stance was, always one of invitation,
Mm-hmm.
always inviting us, but never forcing us,
Yeah.
because He has enough respect for us and our own free will to allow us to make our own choices.
Yeah.
And He invites us to make the right choices, including inviting Him into our heart, but He will never force us to do so.
Yeah. It's true. So I think that's a great note, Chris, for us to start the legislative session on, because we have felt burned before, we have felt disappointed before, we felt betrayed before, by some of the moves in the legislature, and I think we've got to start fresh. We've got to start with fresh energy, with fresh hope, with expectation that God's going to be working something great this legislative session. And look, you and I have made no bones about the fact that there is the good, the bad, and the ugly this session. No doubt about it. But we're going to do our best to focus on the good when it's time to focus on the good. We'll focus on the other things when we need to, right? When we have to go and try and protect against bad legislation and ugly legislation getting passed. But I think for the most part today, we're going to focus on the good.
I think we're going to focus on the good today, and there's a lot of good. And what we have to do is make sure, Danielle, that these bills get through and that they get passed, either in their current form or with suggested amendments that we have. And so, there has to be the will in the legislature to push these bills through. We cannot be in a situation with pre-manipulated outcomes. We have to go in and fight hard, and the legislators have to fight hard to get these bills passed, because in the
Yeah.
final analysis, the days of legislators receiving an enormous amount of credit simply for bringing bills that do not get passed, the people have come to a point, I think, of thoroughgoing skepticism about that.
Yeah.
And sort of the position that people have when legislators bring bills that don't get passed is that, well, was it pre-manipulated? Did you know before you brought the bill that it wasn't going to be passed? Did you know the votes weren't there? Were you simply trying to be able to have your cake and eat it too and say, I fought for the bill, it didn't pass, I'm sorry? Or are you going to go in and really do what's necessary to get this done? And this applies to all of the Republican legislators, the Democrats as well. But this
Yeah.
is a two-thirds Republican dominated legislature. And there is no reason why legislation that protects our fundamental interests in this state should not go in and be passed. And quite frankly, some of it, Danielle, is so straightforward. There should be very, very little debate among Republicans about it.
Yeah. And I also want to mention, Chris, this is our fourth year covering the legislative session together on the State of Freedom. Our fourth session. It's our third year, fourth session, because we started right during the legislative session in April of 2023. So
Wow.
we have learned from the lesson, the school of hard knocks. We and I think now we are a little wiser to where pressure needs to be exerted, and to what our our previous president said that I think rings true in our ears today. Trust but verify. Yeah, you say you're
I
going to
love
do
that.
what you say you're going to do. Yeah, absolutely. Now show me.
Yes, and I think, Danielle, the people who know our show and the people who know LeCag understand that we much prefer to praise than to criticize. We much prefer to praise legislators who are doing the right thing, and helping us to preserve and protect our freedom, than to criticize legislators who are not. But we have an obligation to do both, because you
Yeah.
can't properly inform citizens unless you do both.
Yeah, and hold us accountable. I want to see that this session. Look, it's easy for us to get caught up in the negative. It's easy for us to get caught up in what's going wrong. So if we're not doing a good enough job of praising people for doing the right things, call us out on it. Help us remember. Look, this it's a. I mean, basically, legislative session in Louisiana is a lot like a war. So it's easy to get lost in the battles and forget and lose sight of the victories. It just is because that there's just another battle right in front of you. So please do hold us accountable because we want to make sure that every single champion who's been fighting for the right things is acknowledged properly, and that
Absolutely.
we also need to remember to celebrate those victories and not just get bogged down. Yeah,
Very much so. William F. Buckley Jr. said, Danielle, that without the proper disposition and without, uh, Christ's grace, the natural disposition of the human heart is toward negativity,
yeah,
is toward skepticism, is toward cynicism, and we don't want that. We want the disposition of our heart to be toward optimism and hope. And there is a lot to be hopeful about. We want to live out of the resurrection. We have to
that's
honor
right.
the crucifixion and recognize the extraordinary gift that that was. But I want to live out of the resurrection. That's what a great Jesuit priest told me. And we can do that within the context of how we approach these issues in the legislature. So I'm going in, Danielle, frankly, presuming that conservative Republican legislators are going to do the right thing and are going to pass legislation that is critically important and are going to defeat summarily legislation that threatens our liberty and our freedom. That is the presumption that I will embrace going into the session. So
Yeah.
prove me wrong.
And I'll make a commitment that we're going to start every show with something positive. We'll start with the scripture, but whenever we're referring to what happened in the legislative session, we're going to start with something positive, no matter how deep we have to dig to find it.
I love that, and
Yeah.
I fully assent.
All right. Well, why don't we get into it, Chris? Oh, you know what else I wanted to say, though? I wanted to just make the point that during the next 2, 3 months, while we're walking through this legislative session, there's going to be a lot of shows like this where it's back to the old school, just Chris and me kind of opining, explaining, walking through the legislation and giving the blow by blow of what happened for moving of certain bills. And we want y'all to feel like you are part of the conversation. We want you to be part of the conversation. So please be active, particularly on these kinds of days where we're just walking through legislation. We want to hear. I thought Katie had an excellent idea. We want to hear people's ideas about the best legislation there is, about the worst legislation there is. We want to see. We want you to bring stuff to our attention because, like we said, I think there's 1,361 bills filed this session. That doesn't count any of the resolutions. That's just bills. So we want to we're going to need extra eyes everywhere. So
We
please be
are.
involved and please be in the chat. With that,
Do,
Chris,
let me ask you this: do I have time
yeah,
very briefly to mention something off rail about the U.S. Senate race?
yeah, go for it.
Okay, so I just wanted to mention briefly to the audience that there's an issue that's risen in the U.S. Senate race, and again, I'm bringing this up principally because I think Dr. Fleming has talked about the importance of good self government on the state level, and I know that he embraces that, and I think that he will help promote if he wins good conservative candidates for office and support them. And so I think it's important that we talk about this. But it has to do with Dr. Ralph Abraham, who's a decent man who's been on our show and whom I like. I like Dr. Abraham, but this is important. Dr. Abraham was the number 2 official at CDC until February 23rd. And while he was still the top guy or second top guy at CDC, he contacted Dr. Fleming, and this came out yesterday, and offered Dr. Fleming his position, Dr. Abraham's position. presumably
Deputy director of the
of the
CDC.
CDC, in order to get Dr. Fleming out of the U.S. Senate race. Well, Dr. Fleming declined the offer. So shortly thereafter, Dr. Abraham resigns from the CDC, and 7 days later, he is the campaign chairman for Julia Letlow. Um, so it is really illegal to use to use your influence to offer a federal position or even suggest a federal position in order to induce someone to withdraw from a political race. You can't do that, and so it's a significant problem. And it's not, and I'm bringing it up to say there is no possible way within this 7 day time frame that Julia Letlow did not know what was going on, that did not know that Dr. Abraham was using the influence in his office to try to clear the field for her in the U.S. Senate race by getting Fleming out of it. There's no way. And I bring this up because it's just one more example of a pattern of desperation, in my view, on the part of the Letlow campaign in order to get into the U.S. Senate. But I think it puts Dr. Abraham in a bad position. I know that Letlow was aware of it, and I want our listeners to be aware of the kind of shenanigans that are occurring in order to get Letlow elected to the U.S. Senate. So I wanted to bring that up. Dr. Fleming, once again, he declined the offer. There's no way he's getting out of the U.S. Senate race, but it's just very important for listeners to know exactly what is occurring in that race, and that Dr. Fleming continues to stay above the fray and continues to move forward with a positive message. So that's all I wanted to say about the U.S. Senate race.
I'm glad you brought it up, Chris. When we talked about this yesterday, I'm so disappointed. I really expected more out of Dr. Abraham, and it's hard to come up with another explanation given the sequence of events. So anyway, we'll just leave it
They're
up.
going to say, if it comes up or comes out, and Dr. Fleming is only disclosed it so that he could show the level of desperation. And he's not trying to get Dr. Abraham in trouble or
Yeah.
anything. But the fact of the matter is, it is important that the public knows about it.
Yeah, it is. It's important that the public knows about it, and I find it really disappointing and distressing, frankly.
Yeah.
So people can make their decisions based on that, or at least informed by that.
Absolutely.
Another thing I want to mention just at the top here, Chris, that's unrelated to the session, is that I was watching Matt Meck's show last night on PPN. He's on Rumble, and Peter Tickton was the guest, and Peter Tickton just showed up on the show and just said that he expects Tina Peters to be released this week. So I know we've seen, if you've been following on Twitter, some of the conversation around Governor Jared Polis. He had a friend who I believe was in the Colorado state legislature who had been charged with the same charge as Tina Peters, I believe, which is undue influence of a political or a government official, something like that, whatever it was that Tina was convicted of. And this person served no time, got no time when she
a couple of years of probation.
Yeah. And of course, as we know, Tina Peters was sentenced to 9 years. There's a lot of problems with Tina's sentence. Even I believe they sentenced her using felony sentencing guidelines, but they include whenever they spoke to the jury understood that it was using misdemeanor parameters. So anyway, all that to say, just pray that through, folks. Keep praying for Tina. I pray that we do see her released this week. As many of you know who've been watching us for a long time, Tina has been on our show. She was on our show a number of times before she went into jail. And we hope that she will, once she, recovers and gets recuperated and settled, and hopefully safely someplace outside of Colorado, that we can have her as a guest again and hear her story. Yeah.
It would be great, because we know that when we see her face on our show, she's been released.
Yeah.
Daniel, it's going to take a lot of courage. It's going to take some courage for Polis to do what he needs to do here. The
Yeah.
Attorney General of Colorado came out with a statement strongly opposing her release. He says it would be a miscarriage of justice. I'm sure that there are institutional heavy hitters all over Colorado who are
Yeah.
opposed to her release. So it will take a degree of courage for him to do the right thing here, but he has insinuated it. It would be an absolutely wonderful thing. And to us, an extraordinary act of justice to
Yeah.
release her.
Yeah. And I believe President Trump, even this week, maybe on Monday, put out another truth post demanding her, encouraging her, demanding her release.
Yeah.
So,
So
uh,
hopefully that's going to happen.
yeah. All right. Well, let's get into some bills. We've got all kinds of topics that we want to cover with y'all today, a potpourri of subjects, but I think these are some of the ones that we are most interested in. It's impossible for us to do some kind of comprehensive preview. I know we've tried to do it in the past, and anyway, we are going to be following these bills as they move through committee, so we will just keep you posted as the important bills move. But starting out today, we want to cover the bills related to carbon capture and sequestration. Of course, we've been talking about those for the last couple of weeks pretty consistently, but I think it's important that we mention those up top because that is an issue that is of grave concern to many landowners across the state and many citizens across the state. There's been about 100 bills filed. I think I may have mentioned that yesterday. So that shows us, Chris, that the pressure from the people is being felt by the legislators and they're responding, which to me is excellent. The first
Absolutely.
the first bill, and probably, I think, in your view, Chris, the most important of the session with regard to carbon capture and doing right by the people is House Bill 7 by Representative Mike Johnson. And it seems like this is do or die in order to repeal eminent domain.
Yes, absolutely. And it is a good bill that categorically repeals eminent domain, which is the forcible seizure of private property for CCS projects by private companies. It absolutely repeals that for any and all CCS activity, whether it's the geologic storage or the pipelines. And importantly, Danielle, it has retroactive effect. So it would retroactively nullify any existing permits that have authorized this activity. So it's an extraordinarily important bill. And frankly, if it passes and is signed by the governor, it will largely obviate most of the other bills that are currently pending. It's an extraordinarily important bill, and I can't, and we, needless to say, we are on this like a hawk. We know the names of every member of the House Natural Resources Committee, which is the first hurdle, the first stop. Hopefully, they have a different attitude and a different complexion than they had this time last year, and this bill will get through the House Natural Resources Committee. I will say this, Danielle, and this is a red flag. There is a Democrat by the name of
Ken
Representative
Brass.
Ken Brass, who I believe was just assigned to the House Natural Resources Committee. And I can't
Okay.
help but think that that is an effort to help facilitate the killing of this bill and other CCS bills before the House Natural Resources Committee. Uh, you know what Cameron Henry and Philip de Villiers said very recently about
Yeah.
carbon capture and sequestration at the Baton Rouge Press Club. There's absolutely no secret about where they stand on it. So there has to be enormous pressure exerted on them and on the House Natural Resources Committee to get these bills through committee. We have to look at this, Danielle, at one step at a time. The
Yeah.
first stop is the House Natural Resources Committee. Let's get through that, and then we'll focus on the full House floor.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a number of bills as well, and I believe we mentioned this yesterday, that focus on giving power back to the localities to determine their fate with regard to carbon capture and sequestration, whether they want it or whether they don't. And one of those that you mentioned, Chris, this morning was Representative Mike Johnson's as well, and it's his House Bill 5.
Yes, and Danielle, there are probably 10 or 11, if not more, CCS bills that are substantially similar to Mike Johnson's. Some would require uh, that every local government in the state of Louisiana be allowed to decide the CCS issue for their own parish. And some are limited to one parish, the parish that the author of the legislation happens to represent.
Yeah.
So a lot of duplicate bills. The important thing that we have to keep in mind, Danielle, is that for us to support the local option on CCS, let's just take Mike Johnson's bill. The bill needs to be amended to mandate that there be a parish-wide vote on the issue that goes directly to the people. In my view, it's not good enough simply to confer this power and this authority to a vote of a local government. I don't believe that a local government board, a local police jury, because not all of them are on the up and up. Some of them are executing these NDAs. Some of these are trying to conceal the details of these CCS agreements from the people in their parish. Some of them are on board to facilitate this madness in their parish. That's why it's very important that this go directly to the people. So we're going to talk to Mike Johnson about that and say it's just not good enough to put this. It's better than the law as it exists now, which allows it, but it's not where we need to be. So we need to make sure we push hard to amend it to get to get it off out of the hands of a local government and into the hands directly of the people for a vote. Mandatory.
And 2 points there, Chris. One, for anyone who is new to the show or just catching up on this carbon capture issue, this is State Representative Mike Johnson and the state legislature. This is not Speaker Mike Johnson. It's easy enough to get confused there. And then the other point I want to make, Chris, is the legislators who are really under the gun on this are pretty much the ones who have proposed legislation for the most part, right? Those are the ones whose constituents have expressed extreme displeasure with this whole racket and are putting a lot of downward pressure on their legislators to fix this.
Yes.
So
and there are a lot of parishes involved.
yeah. So wouldn't it seem that there are certain parishes in this state that are more appropriate for carbon capture and sequestration according to industry, right? Like the ground is better to do it allegedly. Some places are not qualified, like the way the land is set up is not make it good for carbon capture in theory, right? So you
Right.
would think that the people who live in the parishes where this is of urgent importance, where there's a real threat, that the people who don't live in the parishes where it's a real threat would just support and follow suit, the ones that would, so that when a similar issue comes to their backyard, the people who are not going to be impacted by it would support what the people want in that locality. I don't know if I'm clearly saying what I'm trying to say, but the point is the people who this is really impacting should be leading the charge on how it's getting handled. And the people who it's not harming probably need to get out of the way. They either need to support what the locals want in that jurisdiction, or they need to but they certainly don't need to be making speeches on the House floor or in a committee saying why this is so important to have if their parish is not even qualified based on the terrain to be subject to this.
Yeah, you have no skin in the game
Yes.
whatsoever. So you really are not in a position to be able to stand up and talk one way or the other about it because it's not going to be affecting you and your parish. You have nothing to lose or gain here. So why would you not? Why would you not support the people in the parishes who are directly threatened by it? I think that's an excellent point. If I tell if there's a robber, a violent robber who wants to break into John's house down the street and he has no intention of coming into my house, I'm really not in any position to be encouraging a law that requires John to leave his front door open.
Yeah.
Because guess what? He's not going to be stealing my stuff.
Well, I think
So,
about I can use the southern parishes as an example, right? So most of the state that this is going to impact directly is in the middle to the northern part of the state, as I understand it. That's where the terrain is more appropriate for this kind of racket, right? I'm not saying it is appropriate, but according to industry, it's acceptable or appropriate. Well, for the southern parishes, it's really important for us that the seafood industry is regulated well. Do I want somebody in Monroe voting against how some legislation that's going to negatively impact my local fishermen or my local shrimper because somebody in Monroe doesn't understand what life is like for a shrimper? No. It seems like there needs to be some reasonable discussion amongst members across the state who are facing different challenges, and that they would support each other on these matters that are of great import to local safety, security, and economic interests.
and I think they should be approaching this, Danielle, from the axiom of Martin Luther King, who said that an injustice don't rest on the belief that simply because an act of injustice is not directly affecting you, that you do not have an obligation to lend your support to righteousness and to justice, because really it's true. An injustice done to anybody
Yeah.
while you remain neutral is ultimately a threat to you. It creates a chalice that ultimately can and will reach to your lips because of the precedent. And maybe it's not on CCS. Maybe it's on another issue. Maybe it's on data centers. Who knows what the issue could be? But your obligation to support the cause of justice and good government it does not begin and end with your consideration about whether it directly affects you or your parish. That's what we have to keep in mind.
Yeah, that's a great one, Chris. Very well said. Much better said than me. Alice in the chat here says it seems the AG should have stepped in before now. 2024 gave them permission to hide this from the people. That needs to be repealed. I guess probably the NDAs. We were following that. And
That
then,
barely passed, the one that
yeah,
barely passed, but it did pass.
yeah. Next up, Chris, we wanted to talk about some bills related to national security. We're having another swipe at some national security legislation that hopefully the legislature will be taking more seriously this year than they did last year. I feel that they were pretty flippant about it, especially with regard to Senator Hodges' legislation last year. So hopefully they will give her a little bit more respect as she's bringing the bills that she's bringing that are of great import this year. And she's also joined by others who are bringing similar or related legislation. So to me, that says that some people have woken up, although the people who are bringing it, I think, had been supportive of her legislation
Yes.
anyway. But the first bill is Senate Bill 200 by Senator Valerie Hodges, and it allows for expropriation of land near military bases that's owned by foreign adversaries or foreign agents of foreign
Yes.
adversaries or agents of foreign adversaries. Forgive me.
Foreign adversary or agent of a foreign adversary. And we have to approach these infrastructure bills, Danielle. We have to approach these bills that are designed to protect our immovable property against foreign threats. We have to understand that there are very sinister governments and sinister people associated with our foreign adversaries who every day systematically are seeking ways to dismantle our
Yeah.
infrastructure, to collapse our economy, and ultimately to destroy the Constitution. We have to approach these bills from that perspective, and they're not going to be changing their objective. These people are not our friends. These people are our enemies. And the only thing standing between them and their ultimate world designs is our Constitution. And how do you collapse a Constitution? By collapsing the infrastructure and the economy of a country. So we have to do this. This bill, SB 200, Danielle, this is one of those bills I alluded to earlier. This should not be met with any controversy this year in the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. Zero. It is a bill that allows, at their discretion, the military in Louisiana to expropriate immovable property if it's owned by one of our foreign adversaries or an agent of a foreign adversary, and the property is within 50 miles of a military installation or critical infrastructure. How many citizens in Louisiana do you think oppose this legislation? I would say it's less than 1% of Louisiana citizens oppose this legislation. So the fact it's bad enough that it was derailed last year by Senator Comrade Greg Miller in Senate Jude A. He has an opportunity, if this is going to Jude A this year, to redeem himself and to lend his public support and his vote to this bill with no questions. And so it is just extremely important that we get this into law this year.
I'll allow him to. I mean, I'll say that I don't mind if he asks useful questions.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. Useful questions, but not questions that are absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
That are obviously designed to encourage his colleagues to vote against legislation
Yeah.
through indirect commentary. That's not what we need. We
Yeah.
need robust support for this very important piece of legislation. There's no reason why any Republican would be opposing it.
Well, and let's, I think it's worth mentioning, Chris, we're at war with Iran right now. I think that's, everybody's got that somewhere rolling around in their mind during the day. And if people watch Promethean Action on X or wherever it gets posted, I really love Susan Kokenda. I just think she's incredible analyst,
too.
geopolitics, just absolutely incredible. But she was talking about the fact that this the war in Iran is hitting a lot more than Iran, right? Iran is a proxy state. And in some ways, it's a proxy state for the UK. In other ways, it's a proxy state for China. But if you just think about, there was a terrorist attack last week in Austin, was a day or two after the war started, of a Senegalese man who's, wearing owned by Allah t-shirt, shouting Allah Akbar, killing people. We have to recognize that those people are in this country. There are people that have been allowed in through the Biden regime, through the open borders, and our state, it's incumbent on our state, it's incumbent upon our legislature and our governor to protect the citizens to the best of their ability. And I think having strong laws that that make it easy for the government to take action against people who are discovered to be foreign agents or foreign adversaries is very important. And so
Exactly.
it's my great hope. Yeah. No, go ahead, Chris.
No, I was just going to say, and maybe it should be, and we're going to talk about a bill that makes it pretty much automatic. But this bill doesn't even make it automatic. This
Yeah.
bill makes it discretionary to expropriate the property. I'm sure there are a lot of citizens who would argue that this should be absolutely automatic. If you got land located within 50 miles and you're a foreign enemy of the country, within 50 miles of a military installation, it should be automatic expropriation. But that's
Yeah.
not even what Senator Hodges' bill does. And I'm sure that's probably because some of the left-leaning Republicans in the legislature probably would require that in order to vote for it.
Which one, Chris, is the automatic one?
Well, I think Blake Miguez.
Okay.
I think Blake Miguez's bill, which is
Senate Bill 395.
which is 395. This is absolutely categorical, and this bill would protect the entire state from influence but this deals specifically with the Communist Chinese Party, which really is probably the primary evil actor in most of this. The Chinese Communist Party is typically the one who you will find is the one that owns the property. They've moved a lot on that. But Blake's bill, SB 395, treats the ownership of any land anywhere in Louisiana, if it's owned by a foreign adversary, as a fundamental threat to our liberty and to our security interests in Louisiana, regardless of where it's located. And his bill would say if you discover that any immovable property in Louisiana is owned by a foreign actor or a foreign adversary, it's automatic statutory expropriation, even if it's owned simply by a citizen of a foreign adversary country. Now, I don't know what your thoughts are on that part of it, Danielle. I think about that, and I think, I understand the sentiment of that. I'm not sure, however, that there should be an automatic categorical expropriation of immovable property simply because it's owned by a citizen of a foreign adversary country who is in the United States. I don't know. I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad, but I don't want to be in a position to where we have a citizen of a foreign country who owns immovable property here, and they're trying to get their citizenship changed. Perhaps they're trying to become an American citizen, and that is a process that can take years in order to fix that. What happens there? They have no loyalty to the foreign country. They're under no allegiance at that point, and they're here because they love the United States of America and they own them. I don't know in that situation whether automatic expropriation of their property is just. And so I think we'll talk to Senator Miguez about this and see where it goes. But I absolutely agree on the broader point that if it is owned by a foreign adversary government or somebody associated, an agent of a foreign adversary government, I think it should be automatically expropriated. I don't think an enemy government or an agent of an enemy government has any right to own anything in the state of Louisiana.
Yeah.
And so I don't think there should be any flexibility there. The only concern I have is the scenario that I just described.
Yeah, I do have one friend who is a Chinese citizen. I feel I have mixed feelings on that point, though, Chris, because we know that there's been a tremendous, tremendous unchecked amount of infiltration, and that there are probably spies in every single industry that are Chinese citizens posing as, innocent employees. So I get the point, is all I'm saying.
I
I
get the
think it's a
point too.
very, I think it's a very messy, it will be very messy in execution should it move forward as written, but I get the
Yeah.
point.
Maybe the solution, Danielle, is to require, in the case of a citizen, just a citizen owning of a foreign government, a foreign enemy government owning property here, that those cases would have to be scrutinized individually on a case by case basis to see and determine whether or not there is a relational connection between that citizen and the government. What is the
Or
relationship between the government?
or
You know what
it's
I'm saying?
a reciprocity issue. I don't think Americans can own property in China. I don't think an American can
Of
own an
course not.
apartment in China. So maybe the reciprocity is you can be a renter, but you can't own property. I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
throwing that out there, but it is certainly an unequal relationship.
Or maybe you, but what about the people who already, what about the citizens who
I don't know.
already own property? Anyway, that's the issue on that.
Yeah.
But I think Miguez is on to something here for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And then another bill that I wanted to bring up by Senator Hodges, Chris, is her Senate Bill 388. And this is protecting state agencies from contracts with foreign adversaries and foreign terrorist organizations. Would you talk about that a little bit? Because I think this is really important. And I just am interested to see how far reaching this might be.
Yeah, this bill, Danielle, this bill essentially says that Louisiana state agencies cannot enter into contracts with foreign adversaries, China, Russia, Iran, or foreign terrorist organization. So basically, it vets where our tax dollars are going to ensure that we're not accidentally funding, hostile foreign regimes. That's what the bill is about. So it says state agencies are prohibited from knowingly awarding, renewing, or even registering contracts with any entity owned or controlled by a foreign adversary. And it authorizes the governor to invoke emergency powers to help state agencies cancel even existing contracts.
Yeah.
So it would have retroactive effect in that sense.
Hey,
And
Chris, would you put your mic closer to your face? Because when you read down on your paper,
yeah.
it's just,
So yeah,
there
no
you go.
problem. So and any company wanting to do business with the state of Louisiana must sign a certificate swearing that they are not benefiting in any way from a foreign adversary. So this is a good bill, Danielle, that is designed to ensure that the state of Louisiana is not entering into contractual relationships with foreign adversary governments or agents of foreign adversary governments, and it would allow the governor, to invoke emergency authority to rescind contracts that already exist.
Yeah.
Senator Hodges this is a very good bill, and this is another one of those bills, Danielle, that I don't think there should be any controversy about in a Republican-dominated legislature. So we'll make that very clear too. But this is a great bill.
Yeah, it is a great bill, and it will be interesting to see if anyone stands up against it, because at this point it seems ridiculous. I mean, it would feel ridiculous at any point, but there's not even the ability, I don't think, for anyone to stand up and say that this is a solution in search of a problem. This is a bill in search of a problem. I don't want to
Exactly.
hear that.
The old tired refrain.
All right. Well, next is Senate Bill 251 by Senator Thomas Presley. You were really impressed by this bill, Chris, and it's about critical infrastructure protection, particularly with regard to cybersecurity and software.
The reason why I really like this bill, Danielle, is that it prohibits any state agencies from entering into any contract, communications contracts, technology innovation systems that uh, where the component parts of any of those systems are produced by a foreign adversary, and it creates a system to what's called rip and replace existing high risk
Oh,
technology
wow.
that's currently in use across the state. So
I think that includes our power infrastructure, right? Aren't our transformers Chinese or something?
yes, and the reason, Danielle, why this bill is very, very important, and why, in a certain sense, we could make a strong argument this is the most important bill of the entire session, is that there's no question that the component parts in electronic voting databases and systems and what is it, the I can't think of the thing, the $12 million that she wants to
The
spend
poll books.
on poll books, the electronic poll books. This bill would prohibit any component parts from being made by any foreign adversary. It's very, very so it's extremely important, I think, that it's valid. So if a voting machine's code or its firmware or even its internal hardware instructions or any part of that system were developed by a foreign adversary government or a subsidiary of a foreign adversary government, it would be prohibited. So this bill indirectly require that any component parts uh, be made either in the United States or certainly manufactured in a country that's not a sworn adversary of the United States. So I think the bill is good, and I look forward to supporting it and making it possibly even stronger. But I like this bill a lot, and I think it could have real implications for our electronic voting system and the parts that make up that system.
Yeah, Chris, does it provide for the process of inspection to know which aspects of our critical infrastructure are in fact compromised by um, Chinese, for instance, or Chinese is probably the most prevalent, I would imagine, um, producer of chips, for instance, and some of these big pieces. Does he lay out how um, each government agency is supposed to go forward to determine whether our infrastructure is compromised?
Well, that's one thing that we definitely need to address in the bill.
Okay.
In other words, who is responsible, A,
Yeah.
and B, how
Ha-
do you
yeah.
determine specifically and definitively the extent to which any of our technological systems in Louisiana are manufactured or have component parts that are manufactured by a foreign adversary.
Yeah.
Very, very important that the principle is critically important, but the methodology is equally important. And so I think we can address that going forward. But the principle of trying to insulate our technology in Louisiana from the maleficent influence of foreign actors is very important. And
Yeah.
Presley, is very, I think, prescient to bring this legislation.
Yeah. I can already hear someone's voice in my ear saying, "Well, we have no way of knowing where these parts came from." So we do need to have that codified.
Yeah, and there certainly is a way of knowing for
Yeah,
sure.
of course. I mean, Google really would be a good start. Um,
Absolutely.
all right, next up, Senate Bill 399 by Senator Adam Bass. I thought this was a really interesting one, Chris, and I think it's a powerful one for the long-term security of the state. It creates the Louisiana Higher Education Research Security Council.
Yeah, and this bill basically requires scrutiny of any contract, any gift, any research partnership that exists between Louisiana and any foreign adversary or any foreign adversary government. Basically, it treats the classrooms in our university as though it is in of itself critical infrastructure, and it scrutinizes contracts, existing relationships between our universities, Louisiana universities, and any foreign adversary. This is a bill, Danielle, that I think Chuck Owen absolutely will be very excited about, and I have no doubt will enthusiastically support. Do you remember, Danielle, that Chuck Owen brought the resolution that
Yeah.
required scrutiny of individuals themselves who are citizens of foreign adversary governments, faculty, administrators on university campuses to scrutinize their relationship with their home governments, the teachers, the administrators, the professors. And so this bill scrutinizes the contracts themselves to make sure that we are not allying ourselves or inadvertently facilitating their sinister objectives.
Yeah.
By doing this, I don't think Louisiana universities should be entering into any contract or accepting any gift whatsoever from anybody associated with a foreign adversary government. Certainly not the adversary government itself. So I think this is a very, very good bill, and it's also it targets the people and the research that lay the foundation for any contract that exists between universities and foreign governments. It's a good bill. And again, do you think that this is the kind of thing that should meet with any controversy in the legislature? I don't think so.
Chris, on the topic of universities, it just occurred to me, I hadn't thought of it before. I didn't see any bills that would extract DEI from public education or from government. Have you run across any that say anything like that?
No, and it's interesting, I suppose, that it doesn't, that there is not, because there is currently a pending federal investigation by the U.S. Department of Education into the Board of Regents to see the extent to which the Board of Regents is still funding in its executive budget DEI in Louisiana. And there's every reason to believe that they are still funding it. Since the feds began that investigation into the Board of Regents, Governor Landry has called for an even broader investigation into DEI and has called for the scrutiny and the examination of every university, every institution, every school in Louisiana, not just the Board of Regents. And so,
But there was the opportunity last year to pass bills to this very thing,
absolutely.
right? Yeah.
So are we saying we're just going to let the feds do it? I don't quite understand why there is not a bill. Look at Shenever's bill from last session that was killed on the Senate floor that would explicitly prohibit any of this DEI in our any. But of course, that wasn't her bill. Wasn't just limited to academic institutions. It applied to every public agency in the state of
Right.
Louisiana, hiring, firing, what you're teaching students in schools. It was very broad based prohibition that died on the Senate floor.
So I'm curious as to why there is not a DEI bill being brought this session. And maybe it's because they're just going to let the feds do it.
Well, Chris, I have a different perspective. I think this is a case of, you remember when perhaps you were in college and maybe you lived like, laundry on the floor. Is the thing, it's just dirty, just messy. And you get a call from your folks saying, "Hey, we're about 30 minutes out. We're coming to see you. Let's get lunch, but we want to come and yeah, you're cleaning that apartment. There's no way. There's absolutely no way. That's what this is. This is Jeff Landry cleaning the apartment before the feds get here or saying, "Look, we're hurrying up. We want to make sure that everything's spick and span, but we're not going to do anything to put any systems in place to protect it, right? We're not going to be organized about it. We're just going to throw everything under the bed."
In other words, we're going to let the feds come in and we'll, it's kind of like the functional equivalent. You know how when you used to go into, dignitaries would go into a foreign terrorist country or a totalitarian government, they would make sure all the streets were cleaned up, all the, homeless
Yeah.
people.
You
And
mean like Gavin Newsom did whenever
yes,
yeah.
make sure all the slums were covered over and it looked like just this pristine place while the dignitaries are there. And then when they leave, it goes back to hell in a handbasket again. That very well could be the case here, Danielle, because again, there is no statutory prohibition. The only thing that exists in Louisiana, if it still even exists, is an executive order from 2 or 3 years ago, and I don't, and that even was very limited. But there's no statutory prohibition in Louisiana right now against DEI in our public institutions. And there certainly should be. So that's a question that we need to ask and inquire about, Danielle, and make sure that there is a statutory prohibition against this in our state. But I think right now they are. I think they're either trying to get cover from this federal, investigation, or they are simply going to, or just let the feds do it. Let the feds impose the regulations, and then we don't have to do anything. I don't know what's going on, but there's no substitute for having a law on our own books in this state.
But if the feds do it and there's no mechanism to stop it from happening going forward, we have just it's like doing a spring cleaning, but not having any organizing. You have to have the systems in place so it doesn't happen continuing beyond the feds.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. It's though they're acting as though, the governor and others are acting as though there's already a statutory prohibition in place against DEI in Louisiana, and the feds are just coming in to see the extent to which it's being honored or enforced. But that's not the case.
And there may
So
be, Chris, perhaps if at the edges of my memory, I can recall some kind of executive order to this effect, but that is not going to cut the mustard.
no, it's not going to cut the mustard because you don't know. Let's just say there is a robust executive order in place currently that covers every public institution in Louisiana, which there is not. Okay, I think that is very limited in scope. But even if it were robust and comprehensive, what happens when the current governor leaves and a
That's right.
Democrat governor gets elected and repeals that executive order? It's over, it's done. It doesn't have the weight of statutory law. And that's why we have to get something codified,
Yeah.
categorically prohibiting this in every public institution in Louisiana.
Yeah. And maybe we'll find some good vehicles to get those
Oh, I think,
on as amendments.
yeah, I think we can because there are some education bills, and yeah, I think we should be able to do that.
Yeah. Okay, just a couple. I just maybe at this point want to just mention where we're going from here today, because this will probably end up being a little bit of a longer episode. But I want to make sure that we also cover AI data centers, parental rights, transparency, and attempts by the legislature to legalize corruption. So that's where we're going from here. Um, and we won't spend so much time on all of these topics or bills, but we just kind of want to put these out there, make sure that you're aware of them, and make sure that we'll be following these closely. So the next, I think, Chris, that brings us to the next topic, which is the AI data centers. There's only one bill that I've seen so far that seems to really address the issues that people are concerned about with respect to the AI data centers in the north part of the state, and that's House Bill 922 by Representative Rodney Shammerhorn, and it is about rate setting, I believe.
Extraordinarily important bill, Danielle. The Pelican Institute, LeCag, and others have come out expressing real concerns about the extent to which these data centers are going to be able to offload up to 50% of their infrastructure costs and their energy costs onto ordinary Louisiana ratepayers. You realize that it's going to cost more energy to run one of these data centers than it is to run the entire city of New Orleans. The cost is just absolutely enormous. And if I were a data center, I would want to see if the Public Service Commission would allow me to offload those costs or some of those costs to other ratepayers. But the fact of the matter is, they are multi-billion-dollar corporations. They have more money than you could ever spend, and so there's no reason why they can't pay all of their own infrastructure costs. I was talking to Rodney Shamerhorn the other day, and he basically said, "Look, I don't get to offload half of my monthly energy bills for my house or for my business to somebody else." So why should a multi-billion-dollar transnational corporation be able to do it? They
Yeah,
can't. So
it's a
what
good
his
point.
bill does is basically says that these utilities cannot, under any circumstances, offload 1%, even 1% of the energy costs of these data centers on to Louisiana ratepayers. Absolutely prohibited from doing it. They have to pay all of their own costs. They have to pull their own wagon. And I think it's extremely important because of the Lightning Amendment that was passed at the Public Service Commission. I believe that there is an opening that would allow that to occur. And people are very, very concerned about it. The Alliance for Good Government, which is more of a liberal organization, the Pelican Institute, which is more conservative, LeCag, and others have expressed concerns about this. And I'm not necessarily saying that the Public Service Commission itself desires for that to happen. They may be getting assurances from these giants, these corporate giants, that would never do that. We're not going to offload it, but we need an absolute guarantee that we're not going to be carrying the freight of these data centers and their energy costs. And Shamerhorn's bill is very strong on that. Once again, if you're a conservative Republican and you want to protect the economic interest of your constituents, you shouldn't even think about voting against this bill in committee.
Well, nobody should, because all of our rates will be going up. The other point, Chris, the other 2 points I want to mention about the AI data centers that people have really grave concerns over are the water, because it takes a tremendous amount of water to cool. I don't know, to cool whatever they need cooling. I don't know. I'm not into this stuff, but I do know that they're taking tremendous amounts of water that they say that they're recycling, which, in scientific terms, they're recycling, but they're taking water in the form of water from a reservoir where people would use it. And yes, they're recycling it. It's evaporating in the process, though. So it's not going back into the same usable form that they took it out as. And so I think there needs to be some real protections about water usage, and water rights being to the people first and to corporations second. Uh, and then I think we ought to all take a really strong, hard look at the tax deals that these guys have gotten.
You
Because
mentioned that yesterday. You
yeah,
mentioned the
why,
tax breaks yesterday.
why should we be welcoming these companies that may, in the long term, employ 20 people? I mean, data centers don't require a lot of employees. They require a couple handfuls of employees, and then a couple security guards, right? It's not
Well, I thought the
it's
whole purpose. I thought the whole purpose of AI was basically to make it to where you don't really have to do much of anything. They do it all for you.
Well, the point is, you're not creating a lot of jobs in this state from having a data center here. You're taking the water, you're trying to push the electricity cost off on the people across the state, and you're also not contributing to the community at all with tax dollars while we foot the bill. Are you kidding me? What kind of deal is this? I know President Trump called Jeff Landry a deal maker. I think that might have been tongue in cheek, Chris, because this is not the kind of deals that's going to bring Louisiana in up to the top of any list. Not a good list.
Absolutely not. And Danielle, President Trump in the State of Union address, and we clipped this, actually mentioned this issue and expressed concern and said there's no possible way that these data centers, these AI centers, should be allowed to offload any of their energy costs onto ordinary
Yeah.
citizens. They shouldn't be able to do it. It's a very, very important issue. Representative Schamerhorn brought a very good bill
Yeah.
that we're going to be pushing very, very hard.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll move on. I'll get off my high horse and get on to the next one. Um, Parental rights, Chris. There's a couple of great bills, two of them by Representative Beryl Amity and one by Representative Emily Chenevere. The first, House Bill 948 by Representative Amity, is about rights of parents regarding the medical treatment of their minor children. I think this is important. We had Tom Renz on maybe a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, where he was talking about this horrific situation happening across the country where they're calling it medical kidnapping, where if the state doesn't like the way that your kid is being treated for whatever, like a disease or ailment, for instance, if the state disapproves of the way that you choose to have your child treated for cancer, then the state can step in, steal your child, and force them to have chemotherapy of their choosing.
Under grounds of parental neglect.
Yeah.
So this bill would prohibit the state from in any way retaliating against or punishing parents who choose alternative methods of treatment for their kids with cancer or other illnesses. Danielle, you know far more about this than I do, but Katie has told me that chemotherapy and the radiation in chemotherapy is oftentimes as bad, if not worse, than the cancer itself. I mean, it leaves you just an absolute skeleton. And I don't think a parent should be in a position where they are punished by the government if they choose an alternative route for treatment. And that's what this bill does. And you know what, Danielle? This bill is very, very important because I can easily see big brother government trying to discriminate against, retaliate against a parent because they're not marching to the beat of establishment, big pharma, big medicine, doing everything that they want you to do according to their protocols. I could very easily see the government accusing a parent of neglect. You're not treating your kid, you're neglecting your kid. There are protocols and medical treatments out there that are proven, and you're not using those treatment protocols and use that as grounds to take a kid from a family. I think
Yeah.
this is very, very important what Representative Amade is bringing this bill.
Yeah, I agree, Chris. I agree. This is super important. And I see in the chat, Alice says that needs to pass. Amen, Alice. It absolutely needs to pass. And it's a shame that the state is a threat uh, to parents and to families. But
It is. It absolutely is a shame. But, many citizens have been habituated, and rightfully so, with good evidence, to consider the government to be adverse to them, to see the government to be an enemy to them. How many times has the government lied to us? And don't get me off on my rant. So, excuse me if there's a parent out there that's working their tail off to save their kid and they want to explore an alternative treatment methodology. That is their choice. It
Yeah.
is not the government's choice.
Amen. All right. The next one by Representative Amade is House Bill 485. It's a proposed constitutional amendment that would provide for parental rights. To me, Chris, this read a little bit like a parent's Bill of Rights in a way.
Yeah, and it really statutory law does, as a matter of general principle in Louisiana, already say that parents are the primary custodian of their kids and they have primary authority over their kids. But this is a proposed constitutional amendment that specifically says that parents are the fundamental guardians of their kids, and they have the fundamental right to decide the nurturing, education, care, custody, and control of their children, subject to what's called strict scrutiny, Danielle. So if her constitutional amendment passes, it would be codified in the Constitution that parents are the primary authorities over their own kids. And in order for the government to intrude in any way into that relationship, they have to show what's called a compelling government interest for doing so, a compelling interest. And the means by which they achieve that interest has to be very narrowly tailored. So this is a very, very important provision that does need to be in the Constitution. You know what, Danielle? It's unfortunate. If you had told our founding fathers when they were writing our Constitution that we need to put a provision in the Constitution that says that parents have the primary authority over their own children and the government does not have a right to inject itself into that sacred relationship, the founding fathers would have said, what the hell are you talking about? Why do
They,
we need that in the Constitution?
they
Of
would have
course,
said,
that's the reality.
they would have said, Chris, that's why we have the Second Amendment. And they would have meant it.
Well said. Well said. That's why we have the 2A, baby. But no, they probably would have said it would have. In other words, what I'm saying is the concept would have been alien to them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we live in a day and age now where the relationship between parents and the government and the effort of the government to bypass parents and to form children in a way that is contrary to the parents' values and contrary really to the foundational principles of our country is a very real threat. And
Yeah.
that's why I think this amendment to the Constitution is very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I was very pleased, Chris, as I know you were, to see House Bill 775 by Representative Emily Chenevere come back around. This is regarding a minor's consent for medical procedures and treatments. I believe this bill has been brought. This is what, the third or fourth time?
Yeah,
Some
third or
version of
fourth
it?
time. Yep, got through the House last year and then died over in the Senate Health and Welfare Committee based upon objections that I thought were either one, bogus, or two, easily subject to an amendment to cure those objections. But instead, the Senate Health and Welfare Committee killed this very important bill. And it's a bill that says that children may not seek any medical treatment or counseling services, minors, without the express written consent of their parents. And, again, can you imagine 100 years ago, 200 years ago, saying that we have to put this in law? They would have said, what's the purpose? But again, the current conditions of our culture and our society mandate this. And
It's not that the conditions just mandate this, the existing law mandates this, right, Chris? I mean, isn't it in Louisiana law that children can determine their own medical fate?
the current law in Louisiana, believe it or not, and this is counterintuitive to most people and very contrary to what Senator Jay Luno said in committee last year, current law in Louisiana allows a minor child, if he goes to a counseling service or to a doctor and says, I believe that I'm afflicted with a disease, I believe that I have a medical problem and I need treatment. Those facilities right now can treat that child or that minor without the written consent or the knowledge of that child's parents in the state of Louisiana. So this bill addresses a very real concern right now in the state of Louisiana. Now, there are a couple of exceptions. If it's a life or death situation, or if a minor is seeking prenatal care of some sort, you can't get an abortion in Louisiana anymore. So I don't believe that the purpose of this would be, and Emily Chenevere is very pro-life. So I think the purpose is a situation where maybe a minor's pregnant and they are extremely afraid of telling their parents about it, at least immediately, and they need some medical care. They would be able to go get medical care, but it would not allow abortion. So I don't know how you feel about that exception.
Well, I mean, I think, you think about a situation where a girl may even think that she's pregnant. She goes to a pregnancy center. She's 16 years old. Can they see her without parental consent? Maybe that's the case. Maybe I'm not saying that I love it, but I would prefer them to be able to see her than not.
Exactly. So that is an exception. And of course, there's an exception for minors who have been judicially emancipated, minors who are in the military. The thought being that if this minor is sufficiently mature to be able to go to a foreign country and fight for the United States of America, then he can go in and get some medical treatment without the consent of his parents. So there are exceptions, but by and large, this bill would prohibit this.
Yeah.
and I think it's very good. There shouldn't be any controversy about this among Republicans, Danielle.
There shouldn't
Most
be
of the
any
bills that were
controversy about
any
from
of this.
anyone. I don't understand. Democrats have babies too.
Well,
They
that's
want to
true.
be able to direct their kids' medical procedures too.
Exactly, exactly. Most of the bills, every bill that we've talked about today, uh, should be
Pretty
non-controversial. Really, even
pretty
among
straightforward.
Democrats.
Yeah.
You're exactly right. So we're going to be paying very, very close attention to the posture of these Republicans and these Democrats in these initial committee hearings on these bills.
Yeah. A couple more to go, Chris. The next topic we have down here is transparency. And I was really impressed with House Bill 709 by Representative Mark Wright. He is doing some things that seem to be cutting the bureaucratic red tape, seem to be providing greater oversight, asserting legislative oversight over the bureaucracy. Would you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, we have a problem on the state level, Danielle, and it's not just on the federal level. Uh, with unelected bureaucrats uh, making these rules that have the effect of law that have not been passed by the legislature. There are essentially sort of mini lawmakers that are making laws. They're unelected, and they oftentimes are not usually are not receiving any degree of legislative oversight or accountability. That's what this bill is designed to guard against and to prohibit. So um, this bill basically says, first off, if any state agency in Louisiana wants to go in and pass a new rule, they have to come to the legislature before they can do that with at least two current rules that they can repeal. And I like that. It's modeled after a federal provision that is designed to really shrink the administrative state. Um, Also, these rules that all these executive agencies have are not going to be perpetual anymore. Any rule will have a sunset provision. It would automatically expire on June 30th of the following year, unless they go to the legislature and the legislature passes a law to keep that rule alive. Also, mandatory routine oversight to review and hold hearings on any single rule that is currently in existence to see the continued need for it. Is this bloated government? Is this executive overreach that was not explicitly authorized by the legislature? So I think it's a very, very good bill, and it's going to create the kind of accountability for these executive agencies that really does not exist in the state of Louisiana now. So,
Yeah.
we've been critical of Mark Wright on some things, and rightfully so, because of some of the things that he's done and has not done in the legislature. But we're going to give credit where credit is due. And we'll do everything we can to make this bill even stronger. But credit to Mark Wright for bringing this legislation and for recognizing the absolute importance. You know what this goes to, Danielle? This really goes to the heart of legislative oversight. It
Yeah.
goes to the heart of the routine legislative oversight of executive agencies that they need to be conducting on a routine basis. And this is going
Yeah.
to help to enhance and make that more robust.
And Chris, Mark Wright first came onto my radar when he brought the initial legislation that provided some the regulatory framework for crypto and for crypto mining. I thought he did an excellent job with that. He has some additional crypto legislation this session that what I've taken a look at looks really great. So a big kudos to him, and thank you, Mark Wright, for that. And we would be happy to work with you on all of those bills. Something in the chat, Chris, that I think is an excellent point. They're asking, is it not automatic with the Chevron Act repeal? But that is just federal, and this is with regard to the state's bureaucratic agencies, right?
Exactly. That has to do with the Chevron doctrine has to do with exactly the same type of federal overreach that we're talking about here on the state level. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if Representative Wright was inspired perhaps to bring this legislation by the repeal of the Chevron doctrine of the U.S. Supreme Court. But this bill would specifically codify those same restrictions or very substantially similar restrictions in state law. No more administrative rules, no more mini laws created by executive agencies that are enforceable against Louisiana citizen without specific legislative oversight and approval of the legislature. And you know what that means, Danielle? That means that citizens will have the opportunity to go in and make their voices heard before legislative committees, before these rules are passed in the legislature. So we'll have an opportunity to go in and have our voices be heard.
Yeah, the only opposition I can see coming down the pike on this, Chris, is that it could stand to clog up the legislative agenda. And so maybe there needs to be a mechanism by which these get tackled during the legislative session, because you can imagine every single agency, every single rule, that is a whole lot. It could just completely overwhelm the system to have every single bill or every single rule sunset every year. So maybe we need to just be creative about how to tackle that, rather than, I think it's an important measure. I just think that that's also a reasonable objection.
Well, if we can have a special extraordinary session on crime,
Yeah.
which is very, very important in the state of Louisiana, then we can have a special extraordinary session whose specific purpose is to go in and gut these labyrinthine executive agency rules that burden Louisiana citizens, let the sun shine on it, make every executive agency in the state go before the legislature and justify these administrative rules and these executive ordinances that are imposed on the state, on Louisiana citizens. I think that would be, I don't think there's a citizen in Louisiana that would oppose the expenditure of taxpayer resources on a special session that addressed this issue. It's that important. And you're right, there are so many of them out there, Danielle. And I think a special session would probably be the right way to address this.
Yeah, absolutely. Or an extended session, right? I mean, we've talked, one of my pet ideas is that the first 2 to 3 weeks of every session needs to be dedicated to repealing outdated legislation, bad bills, bills that are creating bureaucratic nightmares for people. And so this is a similar issue to that. So it could
Yes,
even be a dedicated portion of session to address those issues.
to address those issues. Because the core problem, Danielle, is that many of these rules that are created by these executive agencies have not even a tangential relationship to the original enabling legislation. The legislation authorizes executive action in certain areas and even mandates it. And then the executive agencies extrapolate so far beyond the original letter or spirit of the legislation. And that's where we are. So they
Yeah.
should have to go back before the legislative bodies and justify how any rule that they are imposing on Louisiana citizens is consistent with the intent and the purpose of the original enabling legislation. And maybe we come to a point, Danielle, where we realize that not only are these rules inappropriate and burdensome, but maybe the underlying legislation itself needs to be repealed. And that's
Ding, ding,
something
ding,
that's
ding, ding.
important to look at as well.
Yeah, it is important to look at as well. So we could have a field day with this, but yeah, I was very pleased to see this, and once again, hats off to you, Mark Wright. We'll be looking at ways that we can maybe help support this, and any areas, like you said, Chris, where we might help strengthen it as well with some ideas.
Yes.
The last topic for today is one that is going to set a few people's hair on fire. I titled it "Legislative Attempts to Legalize Corruption." There's quite a few of them. The first one is, I said at the outset everything was probably good legislation. This is the section where it's bad legislation, really bad legislation, very transparently bad legislation. The first one is House Bill 307 by Representative Kyle Green, and it would authorize the governor and legislators to accept and deposit campaign contributions during the session. And you mentioned this yesterday, Chris, I believe, on Warrior Wednesday, but it is transparently, nakedly corrupt.
It's unbelievable, Danielle, because right now, you know, some people would argue, many would argue that our restrictions on campaign donations and political influence generally in the legislative process is far too permissive in the state of Louisiana. But at least on the books now, there are laws that prohibit uh, legislators from accepting campaign cash in the middle of a legislative session or having fundraisers for them in the middle of a legislative session when they're considering and debating and voting on critical items of legislation. Also, currently in law is at least a prohibition that prohibits the governor himself from accepting campaign donations and largesse in cash for 60 days. It's either 30 or 60 days after the legislative session ends, while he's considering whether he's going to sign legislation or veto legislation. You know what Kyle Green's legislation does? Completely dismantles those guardrails entirely. So legislators in the middle of a session can be voting on something during the day, or they have a vote coming up on something the next day, but they're going to a fundraiser the night before that's hosted by the industry or the agency or the company that wants that legislation to pass. I cannot imagine why any Republican would consider voting for this. This is an absolute insult to transparency in the state of Louisiana. And it would dismantle the very few guardrails that still exist in Louisiana with respect to separating the legislative and the governing process from the corruptive influence of money. I don't want anybody voting for this garbage. And I'm curious, Danielle, who is behind this? I want to know who's behind this.
I guess we'll
I
find out.
wonder if it's Kyle Green. I wonder if it's Kyle Green himself who came up with this idea. I would like to know that. And guess what? We can find out.
Okay. Well, I think, Chris, I think we'll see, if this bill moves, if this bill makes significant moves in the legislature, we know who's complicit in it, right? Because the Speaker of the House decides what bills move. Now, you can shut it down. He could make it so this bill never even gets assigned, that it doesn't get picked up by committee. I have a feeling it will get picked up by the committee. Now, the committee would be what? House and Governmental Affairs, most probably, Chris, would deal with this. I would think, look, House and Governmental Affairs Committee, you better shut this down.
I mean, you better shut this thing down. You better shut this thing down quickly.
Yeah. And the next one is almost as disgusting, but in a different way. House Bill 210 by Representative Michael Mellerin would change the ethics laws to allow public board members to be employed by a firm that has a contractual or financial relationship with that entity. What could go wrong,
certain
Chris?
local boards in Louisiana, and I don't think it applies to all boards, but certain boards and commissions in Louisiana, you can have someone sitting on that board or on that commission, and they have a wife or a nephew or no, and they themselves, I believe,
Yeah.
right, Danielle? They themselves are employed by a company that has a financial or a contractual or a business relationship with the board on which they are a voting member. And they do not have to disclose that either to the ethics board or to the board it's on which they serve. What could be the purpose of this? Do you think it's appropriate, Danielle, for anybody to be serving on a board and also be employed by a company that has a financial relationship with that board? Oh, but the law says that they have to recuse themselves from
Come
any
on.
vote that has to do with that employer. They can't participate in that vote. Who cares? There are personal relationships that develop when you're a member of a board. You can exert implicit, even implied influence on your colleagues on a board. It doesn't matter whether you specifically vote on something or not. You shouldn't be able to conceal that type of a relationship from the public, from the ethics board, or from the board on which you serve. It's a direct conflict of interest, and it does absolutely nothing to enhance public confidence in the transparency of our public agencies.
No, and I think this is why we see a lot of retirees on public boards, Chris, because those relationships have no longer should have any at least tangible benefit, right? I mean, if you were employed by a company for 25 years, you may have an affinity to them. You may hate them with the fire of a thousand suns, but they're not explicitly paying your bills day to day. They're not going to be giving you a bonus on contracts signed by the board. So I think there's a significant number of very qualified retirees in the state of Louisiana, or people who have changed industries that can sit on these public boards. The fact I don't think this is appropriate in any way, and I defy Representative Mellerin to give me an example where I would be able to change my mind.
Yeah, and me as well. It just seems to be pretty facially obvious. I know Miller is a Republican, and but unless someone comes up with some you know irrefutable argument of why this is good, which I think is going to be very hard for me to do, certainly in light of our current culture and climate, we're going to oppose this vigorously.
Yeah. And then the next bill is not too dissimilar, Chris. House Bill 250 by Representative Chris Turner. Is Chris Turner? I
Yeah,
think it's Chris Turner, and it's saying that conflict of interest information by members of boards of commission or commissions, basically, if a member of the immediate family of a member of a board or commission does not have to disclose their connection to a contracting firm. And you'll do a
yeah.
better job of explaining this, Chris. But
This is
it's basically like if somebody's wife or husband is employed by an entity that is contracted by the board, you don't have to disclose that. Is that
yeah.
insane?
It's very similar to Millerin's bill, only it specifically applies to your wife or your son or your nephew. So you're serving on a commission or on a board on an agency, and your wife has a contractual relationship with a company that is, doing business with the board. You don't have to disclose that to the ethics board. You don't have to disclose that to the board on which you serve. Why would that not be something that is required to be disclosed? I don't understand that. What's the motive for this?
Well, we saw recently, Chris, where in California, Governor Gavin Newsom was funneling tens of millions of dollars into I believe, a foundation that his wife was running. So I, I think that look, it's just, we don't need more opportunities for corruption in this state. We're trying to chip away at the opportunities for corruption that already exist, and they are many. So,
Exactly, exactly. And Danielle, when you really get down to this, when you think about this, you know, the only inference to be made from some of this legislation is that these legislators want to clear a path on some level to do things that are ethically questionable.
yeah.
And the reason why these prohibitions exist currently is precisely for that reason. And you know, we're not suggesting that there's actual impropriety in every case, but there is absolutely the appearance of impropriety in these cases that make these ethics rules more lax. And 9 times out of 10, it will lead to actual impropriety. And that's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that wraps up the legislative review we have for today. There's tons and tons of legislation out there. There's no limit really to what we could have chosen to bring forward this morning, but these are some of the main bills that we will be looking at. We're tracking tons and tons more beyond this. So you guys will, stay updated through us, but also do your own research, because there's stuff that we will need to be made aware of, things that may have slipped through the cracks. So, don't feel like we're over here carrying all this ourselves. We need y'all to be part of the process as well. A couple of announcements, Chris,
Oh, let me
unless you have
say
any.
this, Danielle,
Yeah, go
before you get
ahead.
to the announcement. Any of our listeners or viewers who come across legislation that is particularly important to you, that you think we need to be made aware of. We may already be aware of it, but please reach out to us, either Chris at lacag.org or Danielle at freedomstate.us, and let us know what it is, because we're your eyes and ears, but guess what? You're also our eyes and ears, and you help us to make sure that there's nothing that's not on our radar screen that needs to be there. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And well said, Chris. The announcements are session starts Monday. So get ready, folks. It's going to be what, 3 months of intensity. If you have
Strap it
not,
on.
if you have not yet signed up for action alerts from LACAG, do that at lacag.org. That way, when there's a call to action. And you can also keep an eye, make sure you're following LACAG and the State of Freedom on Facebook. I think Facebook is probably the place where I'll do most of the legislative updates. Probably also X, Chris.
Yeah, Facebook and X principally.
Yeah. And then next week, we have Brigadier General Blaine Holt coming back with us. I think he'll give some great insight on what's going on with respect to Iran. And who knows what else might happen between now and Tuesday, but he'll be with us Tuesday. I just really enjoyed our conversation with him last time. So looking very much forward to that conversation. I'll host Adam Hartage on Wednesday on For the Love of Freedom. He has a book about how to equip your kids to deal with a world driven by AI. And so I read the book. It's really a fantastic read and a great resource for any family with young children, not even just young children, teenagers as well, and college students too, college age students. So that'll be a great discussion. He was scheduled to come on a couple weeks ago, and we just had a miscommunication, so that didn't happen, but we've got him back scheduled for Wednesday. And then Peter Tickton is scheduled to be with us on Thursday, and we hope that he just has the best news ever. Hopefully we will be celebrating Tina's release by then, but that's what we anticipate talking about is Tina Peters, regardless of how she's situated. We want him to tell us about how things are going with her case, but hopefully not. Hopefully she will have clemency by then, and she will be, on a plane to some beautiful island.
Hopefully everybody will know how things are going with her case, Danielle, because she'll be out and free.
Yeah.
Two final points here, Danielle. I want to remind our viewers that, we cover things, LACAG covers certain things on bills, on our social media that perhaps we've not even talked about on the State of Freedom. If something comes up and there's an important issue or a bill that we want the public to know about. So routinely check the X feed and the Facebook feed, in addition to regularly listening to the State of Freedom. That's very important. And also remember that we are fighting in the legislature for you. The State of Freedom is fighting for you, and LACAG is fighting hard for you to preserve your liberty and your freedom and your rights against an ever increasing big brother government. And we need your help. It's David and Goliath, and we know how that turned out. But David had a slingshot and he had his rocks, and we need you to make sure we have a slingshot that has the rocks in it. So you have to support LACAG and support the State of Freedom to make sure that we can continue to level the playing field in the legislature. These people have deep-pocketed corporate lobbyists, big special interest groups that are supporting them. And we need your support, citizens across the state, to level that playing field and to make sure that we have everything we need to wage this battle. So for the cost of a large pizza, or as you said, Daniel, maybe an expensive cup of coffee or whatever, support LACAG, support the State of Freedom. We're not asking you necessarily to go down to the legislature and sit and testify in a committee room. We'd love for you to do that. We'd welcome you, but we need your financial support. It's critically important so that we can continue to build what we have begun. And together we will preserve liberty in this great state.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Well said. I am in great anticipation of Monday's kickoff. I think, when do you expect we'll really start seeing action? Because the first couple days tend to be kind of getting organized and, kind of shuffling things around and stuff like that. When do you expect the first real movements and committees to start
Well,
happening?
if it starts March 9th, I'm sure, is that right, Danielle?
Yeah.
March 9th is the first day. I'm sure the first day going to be largely organizational, probably the second day, but I think we're going to be prepared to go on the second day. Of course, we'll know if any
Yeah.
specific bills have been set for committee hearing on that Tuesday, the next day. So, but I would assume that Monday there will be no bills scheduled.
Yeah. I wouldn't think so
Maybe
either.
not Tuesday.
And, let me just do this really quickly, Chris, because I think it's important for people who are watching and may not know how to follow the legislation. Okay, this is where you go. You go to legis.la.gov if you want to track legislation on your own, if you want to read the bills in their full form. We don't want anybody to take our word for it. By all means, go read the legislation. And if you have ideas on what could improve certain legislation as well, please reach out to us, just as Chris said, to reach out to us if you are flagging something. Do the same, because we want these bills to be as strong and as good form as possible.
Yes, and I may have the distinction of paraphrasing Hillary Clinton for the first and the last time right now,
Oh, God.
but it does indeed take a village
Yeah.
to accomplish something great. It was just what we're
Yeah.
trying to do. So reach out to us. Let's be each other's eyes and ears.
Yeah. The only consolation, Chris, is there's no way she coined that term.
Exactly. So she herself has to give credit to somebody else.
Yeah, I think it's an African proverb or something like that.
Okay,
All right.
all right.
Well, God bless you, Chris. I'll be talking to you soon, because we're up to our eyeballs in bills.
Let's get it on. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
Led Zeppelin is the best kept secret, but because of us, it's really not a secret anymore. Anybody who has not been to Red Zeppelin on Perkins Road in Baton Rouge, you're truly missing out. The best environment, the best service, and the best pizza in the state of Louisiana. Go to Red Zeppelin today. Tell them the State of Freedom sent you. Fuego, it's just unbelievable. Whether it's the flame-grilled carne asada or a signature mango margarita. I had one of those too. They're serving up a literal feast of freedom at Calle Fuego. It's just extraordinary. I love the owners, Andres and Jose. They run such a great restaurant. The service is extraordinary. The atmosphere is great. So if you're in Pineville in the Alexandria area or passing through, or if you live there, go to Calle Fuego and tell them the State of Freedom sent you.
Tigerland Properties. These are licensed professional realtors in Louisiana, commercial, residential, investments, whatever you choose to do. These people, whether you're buying, whether you're selling, whether you want to invest, these people are the best in the business. They really are. Tigerland Properties, mainly they work in the Boot area of Louisiana, down in South Louisiana, but truly you could not be in better hands if you're buying or selling commercial, residential, or investing than Tigerland Properties. I encourage you to call them 225-320-3004. You'll want to make sure you're in good hands with commercial, residential, real estate, or investment. And they are the best.
Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Any follow-up actions, resources, and links to our sponsors will be in the show notes. All calls to action can be taken at lacag.org. That's LACAG.org.
To learn more about our work, become a monthly subscriber, supporter, or advertiser at freedomstate.us. The State of Freedom, the #1 conservative podcast in Louisiana.